officially get this started. The best thing that we saw in tonight's preseason game was Danielle Hunter. And it was the first play of the game where he gets immediately in Justin Fields' face, forces a check down. Not the best tackling by the Texans today. Not the best, specifically from some of their linebackers. And without Kamari Lassiter out there, some issues. But first play of the game, Danielle Hunter just runs around the left tackle for the Steelers, gets in Justin Fields' face, forces a check down. And then on the second drive of the game, he gets a sack to force an ultimate Steelers punt. Right from the get-go, he is worth the deal that the Houston Texans gave him. 2 years, $49 million total, 48 of it guaranteed. He had 16 and a half sacks last year. He was doing what he did tonight without Will Anderson on the other side. And one of the things that's been really interesting with Danielle Hunter has been hearing him talk about the Houston Texans defensive system. So for those who don't know, when he joined in his introductory press conference, he talked about how he was told, not in his introductory press conference, but I think his first availability with media after practices had started, he talked about how this scheme is the first time where he's in a scheme and he doesn't have to think at all. He's just going in and I guess mindlessly going. On Wednesday, he was asked about this because it's called Don't Think, Just Go. And he said this, quote, "It's been amazing so far, just playing fast, don't have to think about anything, just playing my position. Ultimately, defensive end, you're not supposed to think about too much, but just playing fast. I think they've simplified it here, and I've done a really good job of just applying that on the field." Now, for what it's worth, I heard Jonathan Grenard, former Texans defensive end, on the Greenlight podcast with Chris Long not too long ago, and he also said that now that he's gone, ironically, to the Vikings, where is Danielle Hunter came to the Texans from, Grenard said that he feels the same way, like it's more simple for him in Minnesota, and maybe that's just something that's being said because these guys are in a new place. They want to feel as comfortable as they can, as confident as they can. And if you're confident in yourself and you're one of these athletes, of course you think, yeah, this new place, so much different, so much easier. And if you've actually proven yourself as well, you're going to be given a little bit more free reign as a pass rusher. Take a look at J.J. Watt. Now, Wade Phillips, when he was defensive coordinator for the Texans, took over in 2011. He basically, after a couple of weeks of the year, told J.J. Watt, just do whatever. And as the season wore along, Watt got better and better, and then you saw the last two games of his rookie year where he has the pick six against the Bengals and he has 3 sacks against the Ravens, the divisional round. And then the next year, of course, he has that incredible 2012, and that's how he goes on to become the best Houston Texan ever, at least to this point. But Danielle Hunter comes in right away, having an impact. Very excited about that, to see him in the new Texans uniforms, creating the kind of havoc that he did. But he was not the only Houston Texan who performed tonight on the defensive line. Mario Edwards and Foley Fatukasi, I thought, were great tonight. Drive 1, the 2 had a stuff. Drive 4 on that goal line stand that the Texans had, Fatukasi blew up the offensive lineman on second down, and on third down, Mario Edwards stuffed things, and then on fourth down, Kyle Allen, who used to be the Texans quarterback, threw a fucking terrible pass into the corner of the end zone. I don't know who he was looking for. He had his guy wide open in the corner. I don't know why he threw it as far away as he did. He didn't need to lob it out of the back of the end zone. So the Texans got lucky on that goal line stand. And honestly, we might be talking about a Texans loss if not for that terrible throw by Kyle Allen. But before that, the Texans defensive lineman, Mario Edwards, Foley Fatukasi, I thought they did a fantastic job there to set things up. Danielle Hunter actually was asked about those defensive linemen earlier this week. He said this: those guys are definitely great. We want to be the engine of the defense, sack, and I feel those guys have a pretty good impact. That's something that we need from the snap of the ball. It's either one or the other, so that's something we really need at the defense. They've been doing a good job so far. And I think a lot of us, including myself, looked at the defensive line for the Texans, specifically the defensive tackles, and you thought to yourself, man, why didn't they add anybody this offseason? Because you take a look at the names that they brought in, no one really jumps off the screen. They're bringing back guys that they already had, Khalil Davis, Kurt Heinisch. But the guys that they did bring in are Mario Edwards, who's typically been a defensive end, but is a really big guy. He's had a great training camp. And Foley Fatukasi, they brought away from the Jacksonville Jaguars. And again, it's one preseason game. I'm not 100% sure of who on the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line is trustworthy. And it does take a while, I think, for offensive lines to gel going into a season. But the defensive tackle position for the Texans played really well tonight. And if you want to feel good about it, not just because of a preseason game, well, take it from the Texans defensive coordinator, Matt Burke, who had this to say at a press conference this week about the two and what they've been doing out there on the field.
I really like kind of where they're at, and they're working through Foley. I was with him in New York that year, so he does have a little bit of history in the system. Obviously a bigger body. I mean, really strong hands. So like if he can get off and gets his hands on a lineman, like it's hard to move him. So a different kind of maybe style than we had last year. And yeah, Mario's been a revelation. I think he's just been super explosive. He's probably adapted or taken to the techniques probably better than anyone in the short time that we've had. So sometimes it takes a while for guys to go from, especially a 9-year vet or whatever he is, from a read or different types or like different alignments to really like consistently buy in like to an attack technique that we ask him to play. He's probably adapted better than anyone in such a short time. So explosive athlete, yeah. I joke with him like, man, if you were in this front for your whole career, I mean, it's hard to knock a 10-year career. So I'm not saying he hasn't a great one, but it's fun to see him sort of come to growth in this for sure.
I mean, that's a rave review from a defensive coordinator, and again, we're talking practice, we're talking a preseason game. We're not 100% sure of the offensive line that they're lined up against, but I really liked what I saw from the Texans defensive line today. And I'm not even done because we haven't even talked about the other guys that did well tonight. Two guys who have been here for more than a cup of coffee. Derek Barnett, who came over from the Philadelphia Eagles in the middle of last year, and I thought was a great contributor down the stretch, especially considering for whatever reason the Philadelphia Eagles and all their great pass rushers couldn't figure out how to use him. But he comes here and I thought, had an impact down the stretch. So Barnett has been rejoined by Jerry Hughes. I wasn't sure if Jerry Hughes was going to be back with the Texans, seeing as I think he's 35, 36 years old. But Barnett and Hughes tonight looked really good. And it was the second drive where Jerry Hughes nearly chased Justin Fields down from behind. That's tough to do. I mean, Hughes is 35. Fields is one of the faster quarterbacks in the league. And on the third drive, Hughes and Barnett had a pressure, a sack, and a stuff. Think about it from this perspective. I like to look at a really good pass rush as having waves, and they can throw wave after wave after wave after wave after an offensive line. And the importance of having that is that each wave is theoretically fresh. And if you have multiple pass rushers that can rotate in and out over the course of a game, these guys are going to be as fresh as you possibly can at the end of the game when everybody's really tired and worn out. And to have the volume of pass rushers that the Houston Texans have right now in a game where tonight we didn't even see Will Anderson, who's bulked up and per Danielle Hunter is looking incredible. A little bit of trope, of course, when you're talking about teammates during the offseason, but they have a lot of defensive ends, and it seems like they actually have some good rotational pieces on the defensive tackle side of things. So the biggest takeaway that I have from tonight's preseason game where the Texans took down the Steelers is that the Texans defensive line is a lot better than I think we all thought it might be going into the year. And of course, we knew the pass rush, it had lots of guys because it had Danielle Hunter and because it has the reigning defensive rookie of the year in Will Anderson. But I think what you're seeing from the defensive tackles, and in addition to that, just the fact that they have guys like Derek Barnett and Jerry Hughes who can come off the bench a couple of times to give Hunter or Anderson a blow and also be competent while doing it. You're not taking a huge step back with those guys out there. Hughes has been a really good defender for a while, and Barnett clearly looking good with the Texans. You got to be really thrilled about that. I know I am for sure. So we start with the defensive line. We also saw for 2 series, C.J. Stroud and the Houston Texans offense. Now, we'll talk about the running game in a little bit, but I want to specifically focus on Tank Dell. Dell's had a rather quiet camp, at least at the training camp practices that I've been able to go to here in Houston. That might have changed up in Ohio. I wasn't there. All I have to go off of are the notes that people share after practice. And I trust my own eyes generally better than I trust other people. That's not to say the people that are out there aren't doing a great job, but I know what I see and I know what others see. And it's kind of dishonest intellectually to have a take based off of something that somebody else sees. So Dell has had a rather quiet camp. We've seen a lot of Stephon Diggs. We've seen the occasional Nico Collins. But this game tonight, 2 plays, Tank Dell looks like Tank Dell. First off, the punt return. 20 yards. Gets decked by ex-Texan Cam Johnston and Peyton Wilson out of bounds. Probably should have been a flag there. The referees were not great. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But then you have a beautiful throw on 3rd down from C.J. Stroud to Tank Dell. And it's not just that he catches the ball. He wiggles, he runs through a tackle, and he ends up scoring on the play. Really good to see Dell back. There was a part of me that was wondering, hey, what's Dell going to be after a year where he injured his leg and also got shot? But that was a really great start. And this wide receiver core, it is loaded, just as loaded as perhaps the pass rushers that the Houston Texans have. I'm going to read a couple of your comments before we get into everything else from tonight's preseason game. Parker Marathon says, the coworker bet me a $20 pre-roll from my job if the Texans beat the Steelers. LOL, easy dub. You're a psycho if you're betting on preseason football. WOW Spartacus says it isn't a Paul Gallant stream unless it's 3 hours after the game already ended. Fuck you, first off. Second off, I love you. Third off, I wanted to get a bunch of notes that I took from the past week of training camp into this as well, but you're right. I generally end up late on these, and as you can tell, I was trying to figure out how to incorporate this new way that I'm doing the show with the technology available to me. You can't do a test show. You kind of have to just raw dog it, if you will. What else do we have here? Guillermo de Villa, I forget sometimes you're as old as you are. Fuck you too. What the fuck? What are we doing? You'd really think a guy with the initials DP, says Brandon Helland, would get more penetration. Hi-oh! We'll get to that in a moment. Fletch C says Gallant's still better at streaming than DP at FB. Why is everyone hating on Dameon Pierce? Fletch C, Hunter has major defensive player of the year potential. Hunter was the number 1 in the NFL and TFLs last year. Number 3 in stops and forced fumbles. Yeah, he had a great year last year. Honestly, it's the most forgotten offseason acquisition. Stephon Diggs, statistically, did not have a great year, but everyone's talking about Stephon Diggs because he's a wide receiver and there's the drama. But Danielle Hunter, I mean, 16 and a half sacks, that's incredible over a 17-game season. Guillermo de Villa asks, besides the big guys, who do you think is going to have a breakout / career year this year? Well, Derek Stingley is my first choice here. And I know that might be cheating because after he got healthy this past year, he looked really good down the stretch. His ball skills are incredible. But the difference with Stingley this year that I've noticed in training camp practices when I've been out there has been that he's got a lot more confidence. And he's not the most vocal guy, but from the training camp practices in Houston where he had an interception and he runs up to the crowd and he's hamming it up in front of them, to the moment where he got into it with Dalton Schultz and put Schultz on his ass. Cheap shot, sure. Everything's fine, but I was surprised that he had that in his bag. This week, from what I understand, at a practice, he had an interception where he went over to the sideline and he threw the ball at the offense on the sideline after getting the pick, which is super cocky. And he had another interception, which would have been a pick six, and he was looking behind him as he got it, like in a taunting way. I think he's supremely confident in himself now. And I think when you're really confident as a corner, it's huge to have that. And obviously, you're going to have moments where it wavers, but he's added a physicality. There was a play tonight where he came up in run support. And again, he's a corner. You don't expect a corner to do that. I love corners who do that. That's why Ty Law, growing up, was one of my favorite players. Ty Law, for those who don't know, played for the New England Patriots for a while. And he was a big body guy. And he was a good tackler in addition to being a good cover guy. It seems like these days in a post-Darrelle Revis world, a lot of these guys, they're not really prioritizing tackling. And it's kind of soft, in my opinion. But hey, you know what? Deion Sanders, Darrelle Revis, they had great careers. They didn't tackle much. But Stingley is showing a physicality that I did not know he had. And it excites me. So if I have to pick a breakout player this year, it's Derek Stingley. I feel like we might be having top corner in the NFL conversation if he's healthy for a whole year. More comments here. Tim Batchelor says, I want to see J.J. Watt back. I think we all do. I agree. Arthur Foxake asks, was Paul banned from ESPN? What do you mean by that? I mean, I work for an ESPN radio station. Guillermo De Villa says, Dell went from season-ending surgery to getting shot and now getting ready for the season. Mimi asks, how did the O-line do? How are they looking in practice? So I wasn't at practice. Sorry for putting on my Jeffrey Dahmer glasses, but this helps me. The glare from the light, it's a lot. These blue light glasses help a little bit. I didn't get to watch this week in practice, but I think the offensive line has really struggled all training camp long. And to go back to the guys who were criticizing Dameon Pierce just a little bit ago, I don't think everyone's being entirely fair to Dameon Pierce and honestly all of the running backs based off of what we saw tonight. I stopped in and was observing Landry Locker and Cody Stutes. They had their live stream together. I was there for a little bit, sent a few chats. And Landry threw out the question, is Cam Akers better than Dameon Pierce? I'm not going to say that. I've always felt that Cam Akers is really overrated. I think that fantasy football culture has put him on a pedestal that he doesn't deserve. It used to drive me crazy, the amount of headlines that you would see about Cam Akers and his future on Pro Football Talk. I don't think he's that good of a player. I think Dameon Pierce has elite tackle breaking ability. And I think that what we saw from Dameon Pierce in his rookie season in 2022 is who he is. There is a possibility that he is not as fit for this scheme. I thought he was very reflective this offseason, this training camp, when asked about last year and the things that he wasn't doing off of the field. And I don't know, call me a sucker who falls for a story about a guy who's reflective and beats himself up and is talking to his mom. But he had some incredible, I thought, transparent and open comments about how this year is going to really serve him well. And a lot of people tonight seem to be reacting and looking at what Dameon Pierce wasn't able to do, and they think it's Pierce's fault. And I don't think it was his fault tonight. I felt like he had nowhere to go in his first three runs. The guy in the Steelers who was second to hit Tank Dell out of bounds on that punt return always seemed like he was right exactly in the hole where Dameon Pierce was supposed to go into. And okay, I suppose in a zone read, there's going to be offense, there's going to be other holes open. And maybe if I had the all-22 tape of today's game, I could say, oh, Pierce should have gone here or there. But in an offensive line that was missing Laramie Tunsil, Titus Howard, and Shaq Mason, he had nowhere to go. I mean, there was a toss play that they had. I think this was his last carry where I think the ball was supposed to go to the right. And Pierce takes it, and he ends up having to go to the left because there's nowhere to go. So I think it's wrong, the idea that Akers is better than Pierce. I just don't buy into that for a second. Pierce hasn't had both of his Achilles busted. Pierce is a much better tackle breaker. Pierce has big playability, as we saw with the kick return touchdown that he had last year against the Browns. I feel like we have to see this offensive line at full strength in a game to properly gauge Pierce. And maybe Joe Mixon's going to get all the looks, and we're going to find ourselves in the exact same spot that we were last year, where Dameon Pierce isn't even getting on the field. But I am not going to throw Pierce under the bus for today. I think it's the offensive line, which has really been struggling all camp, and I'm a little bit concerned about their ability to run the football behind this offensive line. Again, 3 pieces are missing, so that, I think, is an explainable reason for why things did not go so well. Akers does deserve credit for tonight's game, by the way, and Akers played well in preseason game number 1. But remember where he's coming into the game. He's coming into these games late. Pierce is in early. Akers is coming in late. Akers is making catches and runs after the catch. But tonight, if you take a look at the numbers that Akers had, he was averaging 2.8 yards a carry. Oh, so he has a couple of catches and runs, and we're acting like Akers is better than Pierce because of that. So perhaps this is a line in the sand that I'm drawing that ultimately everybody else is going to end up being right on. But I'm not giving up on Dameon Pierce yet. I felt that way going into this offseason and going into this year. The guy is talented. Maybe he won't be a scheme fit in a zone running scheme, but I don't think that his struggles, as some are calling them tonight, are an issue. Brandon Hallam says Robert Woods, Ben Skowronek, Cam Akers. Are we the Houston Rams? I mean, no, because none of those guys really mattered of late. Like Robert Woods, it's 2017, 2018 when he was last thought of as a top receiver. I get that they all played for the Rams, but nah, I'm not going there. What else do we have? Other observations from tonight's game before we go into everything that I saw this week, some quotes and some interviews. The defensive backs are flying to the ball for the Texans. They truly are. Early on, it was Jalen Petrie who flew up and made a nice play in run support. I mentioned that Derek Stingley, who just seems so much more physical this year, but Kalen Bullock too. Kalen Bullock was advertised to us, the rookie safety out of USC, as a guy who takes horrendous angles tackling guys. And I felt like he's always around the play as it wrapped up when he came into the game, and he's got some impressive range. There was a play that you might have remembered, a deep ball thrown by Kyle Allen, who is god-awful, where Bullock ranges all the way from the middle of the field over to the sideline, and his feet weren't able to stay in bounds, but, I mean, he went from the middle of the field to the sideline on a deep pass, and he caught the ball. I thought it was a hell of a break on the ball and really impressive speed. Kyle Allen's not a good quarterback, so it wasn't a good throw, but Bullock did a great job on that play, and he and Kamari Lassiter, they might have found 2 real good pieces in the secondary with those picks. Blake Fisher, on the other hand, it is an uphill battle. It's honestly looking like if he plays at all this year, the Texans are going to be in some trouble. Other observations from tonight's game. I like Tommy Townsend. He's got a leg. I think the Steeler returner muffed it twice early on, and the Texans recovered one of those. I saw Townsend, it seemed like he was jawing with somebody afterwards. I don't know if there's something that he does with the ball that puts a little extra spin or something on it, but he has a leg. He gets some serious hang time, and they had the Steelers a tough time catching his punts tonight. Punts are really hard to catch. I was our backup punt returner in high school for the Shorecrest Preparatory School Fighting Chargers of St. Petersburg, Florida, back in 2006, and I knew I could not catch a punt. Like, the best ever kick return I had was on a safety kick by the way, look up worst play ever on my YouTube channel. You will see a guy run the wrong way against us. It set up that safety kick, and I muffed that. And it was a punt. Went through my hands. I picked it up, and I still had a good return on it, but catching a punt is really hard. Tommy Townsend does a very good job with how he punts it, but I always feel bad for guys who muff punts because whenever I would come in as our backup punt returner, I would just wave fair catch and move as far away from the ball as I possibly could when I was playing back in high school because I knew I was going to fuck it up. So I never even bothered. The referees, they're in preseason mode. The throwaway by C.J. Stroud right before the touchdown, that should have been called grounding. Didn't get to the line of scrimmage, and I don't really think that Stroud was trying to throw it to Dalton Schultz. I'll take it, but that was not grounding. Got to make it to the line of scrimmage. It wasn't to the line of scrimmage. He was clearly throwing it away to avoid the sack. Worked out in the Texans' favor. There was a clear catch on the right sideline with Chris Boyd in coverage. That was clearly a reception. They missed that. A few interference calls that they missed. There was that one down the right sideline. People were mad about Dalton Schultz getting tugged down. I felt like Schultz embellished, and I felt like he shouldn't have gotten the call. If you're a tight end, a defensive back should not be able to bring you down. Maybe there was a little bit of a hold, but the ball was uncatchable, and he embellished. I hate it when big guys embellish. Come on. You're a tight end. Defensive back should not be able to drag you down. Mimi asks about the new kickoff. The broadcasts are going to have to figure out how to show it properly because I thought it was terrible today. Now, CBS, Fox probably have more resources than the Houston Texans broadcast of a preseason game, but they are zoomed out so far so that they can show the kicker kicking it from the 30, but they can also show the coverage team, and it's zoomed out so far to the point where you barely see any of the action. I had to rewind the first kickoff a couple of times just so I could see what the hell happened. Because I was like, wait a second, why did that guy fall? And the Steeler returner ran into his own guy. And I had to rewind that a couple of times to see it. I really didn't like the green landing zone graphic that they had on the broadcast. I thought it was really busy. I thought it was distracting. So that too. Not a fan. We'll see if this kickoff actually leads to more returns and is safer when the regular season begins. Football is inherently not safe. I don't think that teams are going to continue to kick the football off all season long. I think eventually they're going to realize it's more of a headache than it's worth. We got to keep guys on special teams that could be maybe other players, special teamers specifically, instead of having guys that are like maybe more traditional position players on the roster, 53-man roster, because of this kickoff. And I think some teams are going to think to it themselves, 30-yard line's not that much of a penalty. I mean, the touchbacks were already going to the 25. Is booting it out the back of the end zone to the 30? Is that really the end of the world? Not really. Injury-wise, I wish we got to see more Kamari Lassiter. I do wish we got to see the Houston Texans starting offensive line at full strength. And one last thought on the game. I do not miss Kyle Allen. That missed end zone throw is horrible. Brandon Hallam asks, what do you think about Fairbairn's short kickoff? I'm curious as to what he was trying to do. He might have just missed the ball, but it wasn't good. Fuck around in a preseason game if you're a kicker and you have job security. In a regular season game, you got to be careful there. Oh, yeah. Got a little water. Let's pour a little vino out here, huh? Oh, I'm from Game of Thrones. Look at me. Okay. Let's talk about some of the other stuff from the Houston Texans over the course of the past week. The offense finally looked good at practice on Monday. And then Tuesday it rained, and things were shaky again. If you are a gambling person and the Texans are playing in the elements this year, I would bet against them. I would bet against them. I'd bet the under for them, and I would bet against them. For whatever reason, they just struggle in the elements. They've had multiple opportunities to practice in it, so it's not going to be completely foreign to them when the regular season starts. But I don't know, man. they are really hamstrung by the rain, and that is a bit concerning. What else really happened in practice? It was in Ohio, so I wasn't able to see a lot of these practices. Cebu asks, what am I drinking? I'm drinking, it's called Light in Space. It's a Cabernet Sauvignon. Cabernet Sauvignon. From liberal Central Coast, California. So there you go. Mimi asks, you can't do onside kicks anymore. You cannot. Brandon Halam asks, Green Bay, Chiefs, Pats. I don't know what that means. I do not know what that means. Let's go through the interviews that the Houston Texans did this week. First, D'Amico Ryans, Nico Collins, and Daniil Hunter were with Kay Adams, formerly of Good Morning Football, now of the Up and Adams podcast. And I want to give a shout out to @Texans Commenter. Now, I do think from time to time, Texans Commenter gets a little carried away. You can see this on the screen right now. D'Amico is the definition of a player's coach. Listen to his answer to Hey Kay Adams on what it means to be a player's coach. This answer gave me goosebumps. No, it did not give you goosebumps. D'Amico is generally pretty boring when he talks. Nothing against D'Amico, nothing against any coach who's boring. None of those guys want to be up there at the podium. And generally, they feel inconvenienced by us. Some just happen to be polite about it. Others, like my favorite head coach ever, Bill Belichick, are dicks about it. Now, D'Amico was asked about whether or not J.J. Watt could potentially return to the Houston Texans. And I'm sure that we all want to see it in some way, shape, or form. So here he is with Kay Adams answering that question. You can't really see it in this angle. Let me, well, I guess you're just going to have to hear it. So here is Kay Adams asking D'Amico Ryans about the return of J.J. Watt.
Is there room for J.J. Watt on this team? TJ kept the door open.
Yeah.
Caserio kept the door open.
Right.
Now you better close the door, coach. You got the opportunity right here.
JJ knows. Anytime he's ready, I'm ready.
What does that mean?
If he's ready. JJ's been out now for, 2 years? When you stop playing football for 2 years, it's hard to come back.
So you're saying that knowing it's an open invitation, but he's probably not going to take it.
It's always open for JJ. I'm never closing that door.
We're leaving the door open. Appreciate the time, coach.
I love that. I love the way that he handled that. I mean, you don't want to close the door on J.J. Watt. But it does seem rather unlikely he'll be back, even though he is fucking shredded right now. I don't know how many people have seen the pictures of him. And listen, I can appreciate a good-looking guy. Oh, Paul's gay. Whatever. I don't care if people think I'm gay because of that. J.J. Watt looks ripped. Daniil Hunter's biceps are insane. They're so veiny and vascular. I want them. But being that ripped does not necessarily mean you're in the best football shape. For those who don't remember, Dwayne Brown, remember him, former Houston Texans left tackle. There was 1 year, I think it was 2013, where he showed up in the best shape of his life. And when he was in the best shape of his life, he did not play particularly well. So ultimately, even though he looks good, I don't think it's going to happen. Brandon Halam is saying that hang on, I'll get to that comment in a moment. Cebu says, how injured is Will if he couldn't play tonight? It's a preseason game. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Brandon Halam says, Autry suspended, called J.J. Watt. I like what they have on the interior of the defensive line. And Autry, that's where he's likely going to be used the most as sort of a sub player playing defensive tackle in pass rush situations. Of course, he'll play defensive tackle too from time to time. Mimi says he could get like 20 plays a game at defensive tackle. True, but he's probably going to want a lot of money to play 20 plays a game. It's going to take him a while to get back up to speed. I am not closing the door either. We'd all love to see it. you're lying if you don't want to see J.J. Watt back on this team, especially if they have a chance to actually make it deep into the playoffs. And on top of that, he's going to have to share his NFL Hall of Fame induction with Tom Brady. And let's be honest, he's just going to be overshadowed by that. But I'm skeptical about it. Brandon Hallam clarified that the Green Bay Chiefs and Pats games, those might be all bad weather games. Fair enough. Yeah. Yep. Those might not be the best days for the Houston Texans. The game against the Jets last year, oh boy, rough. A rough one. All right. Let me check to see. We got a couple of tweets right now. Ooh, shout out to the General, John McClain, for retweeting my shit. Anyway. What else do we have here? More interviews with D'Amico Ryans, Kay Adams. I went on a rant about this on my radio show this week, and I feel like I'm totally merited in going on a rant about this. Kay Adams asked D'Amico Ryans, who's the Texans' number one wide receiver? Here was his answer.
Are y'all operating, though, in this offense without a number one wide receiver?
Who's number one? Whoever gets the ball, that's number one, right? I think when you have as many talented guys as we have, Tank, Nico, Steph, I mean, you have three of the top guys in the league at the position. So it's just a matter of, CJ just going through his process and hitting whoever is open. That's number one.
I hate it how people are obsessed with who the wide receiver one is. When the fuck did basketball invade football? The wide receiver one is the guy that you throw it to when the game's on the line. No, you throw it to the open guy because all these people are paid to catch the football when they're open. They're also paid to get open. Guess what? You're not going to get open every single play. Also, some plays are designed to make specific players open. And look, I get that there's some ego that's going to have to be managed with Stephon Diggs now aboard, with Nico Collins, with Tank Dell. Every wide receiver wants the ball every single play, whether they're playing flag football like your boy right here or playing in real life. That is a real dynamic, but it does not matter who the wide receiver one is. And everyone wants to talk about this, and I don't understand why everybody wants to talk about this. I really don't. They are loaded at the position, which is awesome. But who's wide receiver one? Who fucking cares? Statistics are so dumb. And people that play fantasy football are so obsessed with them. Win the game. And that's all those players should be thinking about too. If you're a wide receiver, who gives a shit if you have 9 receptions for 180 yards or you have 3 receptions for 20 if you won the fucking game? I get it. There's bonuses and shit at the end of the year. You want to be on the All-Pro team. You want to be a Pro Bowler. You want to be a Hall of Famer. Blah, 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 blah. Win. That's all that matters. Who's the wide receiver one? Shut the fuck up. Oh, my God. Why? Why do you care? It doesn't matter at all. It never has. And I get it. Like, I grew up rooting for the Patriots, and the Patriots never really had that traditional wide receiver one outside of a couple of years with Randy Moss. But it doesn't matter who the number one wide receiver is when you have a great quarterback. CJ Stroud's a great quarterback. All these receivers, shut the fuck up, do your job. And I'm not even talking about the wide receivers because they're not bitching yet. I just hate that people are having this like long, drawn-out conversation about who the wide receiver one is. And no one even calls it wide receiver one. No one does that. Until all of a sudden, we've done this thing where QB1, yeah, he's a QB1. No, he's the starting quarterback. Shut the fuck up. No one says that. No one ever said that. Same thing with wide receiver one. That's a fantasy football term. Why are we foisting this into the lexicon? And why do people care about who the number one wide receiver is? It doesn't fucking matter. It really doesn't. These are not conversations I want to get in. Someone was trying to correct me on that when I was talking about that during my rant, which was more psychotic in nature, on, I think, Thursday's show. I think it's scheduled to post this weekend. Maybe it's already posted. For the life of me, I just don't get why people want to have that. Like, who's the real wide receiver one? Who fucking cares? Win the game. And rant. I'm a little bit more quiet tonight because I don't want to wake up my downstairs neighbors. More comments here. Brandon Hallam. TJ Watt said his brother still had the bug. Eating crazy amount of food. Going over plays with him. The idea that JJ Watt might be like waiting to see who does better in the middle of the year and signing between the Packers, though that's probably unlikely. I imagine he would think about playing for the Packers, though, just because of the Wisconsin ties. And the Texans, and maybe the Steelers. The Steelers he's not going to join because, like, the Steelers' quarterback situation's a mess. Russell Wilson's not Russell Wilson anymore. Justin Fields can't even do a snap exchange. Fumbled the snap twice tonight. Mimi says, take a sip. Fair point. Brandon Hallam. Hear me out. Bears week 2. 52 guys run out of the tunnel. Everyone's pumped. Suddenly turned down for Watt. Kicks on. The return. That would be amazing. We talked about that this week. Joe and I did. I really want to be surprised if J.J. Watt comes back. I don't want to know what's going to happen coming in. I want it to be like a wrestling entrance. Engineer says, Cade Stover looks like he's going to be a problem at tight end for the league. Maybe. I don't know. I'm not going to go that far. Damian Pierce and John Mechie disappointing. I don't think Damian Pierce was as disappointing as he's being made out to be. And I'll be honest, John Mechie, I didn't pay much attention to the second half of this game. I know Cam Akers did some things, but people have been trying to say that there's like actually an intriguing competition for the wide receivers after Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell, and I don't find it intriguing at all. Ben Skowronek has, I think, had the best camp of everybody. People were talking about how Xavier Hutchinson's like really turning heads. I mean, that drop that he had was awful. He had the most receiving yards in preseason game number 1, but the receiver competition after the first 3 and then Noah Brown, like no one's really setting themselves apart. Robert Woods has really had some shaky moments in training camp. I don't think that Mechie's going to get cut. I don't. I think if they're going to keep anybody, it would probably be a guy that they drafted in the second round. I don't think they're going to be willing to give up on him. Maybe there's some sort of mysterious injury, injured reserve designation that he gets. And we're like, wait, what is he actually hurt with? What is he actually dealing with? But I don't see, I don't see them cutting him. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I just don't see it happening. Danielle Hunter, for those who were just tuning in, I think he was the star of tonight's preseason game. I think he's already worth the contract based off of 2 series where he dominated and Will Anderson wasn't even out there. He was on with Kay Adams on the Up and Adams show, and Kay Adams believes the Texans are going to have a top 5 defense because of the volume of pass rushers they have. Here's Danielle Hunter talking about all of those pass rushers.
When you come into a team where you're new, you're a rookie in a way, but you're walking in as this veteran, this badass veteran. What's that like?
I don't look at it in any certain type of way. I just come in, try to do my part, help the team get better, help the team get wins, bring up the young guys, and bring up the spirit of the team. I'm here to help the football team win football games and win championships. So.
And you do that by destroying quarterbacks, which I love. I was looking at the numbers this morning. It's great. You got like Jalen Hurts 3 times in a game. He's terrified. You got your hands on Mahomes last year. That was really nice. When it comes to this year, you get to face the NFC. You get to face the North. What's that going to be like going back up against Minnesota?
It's going to be fun, being able to go out there with my teammates, rushing together as a unit, as a defensive line. All that wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for us working together as a unit last year. But this year, it should be even better because we have more veterans. We have over 40 years plus of combined experience years in our defensive line room. So we're pretty excited about that.
Yowzes. 40 years combined of experience. I mean, that is pretty cool. Now, does everyone stay healthy? Who knows? Got to knock on wood. 40 years of experience means veterans, means maybe higher propensity to be hurt. But I like the way Hunter has been talking about this pass rush as a unit, because that's what it is. You know, you do have the individual pass rushers who stand out, but in Hunter and Anderson and Barnett and how am I forgetting his name already? Jerry Hughes. And then with the defensive tackles in the middle, like I feel pretty good about what the Texans are throwing out there, and I think you should too. More interviews that Danielle Hunter did with Kay Adams. He was asked how scary he looks, as was Nico Collins. Here's what Nico had to say, and then what Danielle had to say about being considered a scary-looking fellow.
Danielle is so scary.
Yeah, sure.
Why is he so
Nah.
scary? I've never been so tense in an
crazy.
interview.
I mean, it's crazy, especially like when I line up in the cut split and I see him like arms width apart from me. I'm like, yo, just don't touch me.
People say that all the time, but you just gotta get to know me.
No, what do you mean? I'm actually like I'm tense. Like you're an intimidating man. You don't think so?
I mean, people say that all the time.
Yeah.
But you just gotta get to know me.
I think I would pee down my leg if I was a quarterback facing you. Especially like I'm picturing like just seeing the top half of your face. Like I would lose my mind, I think, a little bit. You like that? Yeah.
Football wise, yeah.
Danielle is
I love how you wrapped it up saying football-wise, yeah. I hope he wasn't offended by Kay, because Kay's talking about him as a pass rusher, not as a man. I mean, Danielle's a good-looking guy, and he's fucking yoked. Like, his biceps are... She's tiny. Kay Adams is a tiny lady. His biceps... If you take a look at that video back there... Hang on. Let's just do, like, a comparison here. I mean, his bicep, it's almost like the size of her torso. You know? He is an intimidating looking guy. But that's not a bad thing. And I love how at the end he's like on the field, intimidating. I like it. Off the field, no, you don't want that. But I need to ask him about his bicep routine. I want to get those biceps. They're yoked. Other interviews that Houston Texans players did. Nico Collins and Tank Dell were on Bussin' with the Boys. This interview took place about 2 weeks ago, but I think it finally aired this week. And Tank Dell, who looked really good in tonight's preseason game, he had a great punt returner, and he had that touchdown catch, catches the ball, jukes a defender, breaks a tackle on another defender. Here is what Tank Dell has to say about the Houston Texans wide receiver group.
Said everything. Where would you guys rank your receiving core in the league right now?
I'm
You guys seem
confident.
pretty
I'm
stacked in the
confident.
room.
So me personally, I mean, we got to go out there and put in the work and show everybody else. But you know, I feel like our confidence in the receiver room, I feel like we gonna say first.
Yeah,
we gonna say we top two and not two. But
What other teams out there you kind of have do you keep your eye on, or you think would be in that list with y'all?
man, there's some great receivers. You got. I feel like you got Chicago.
What?
So I'm sure that they went into talking about all the different wide receiver groups that they were going to be competing with. 1 through 3, yeah, they got a very strong case to have the top wide receiver unit in the NFL, especially with what Tank Dell did last year, and especially since Tank Dell, who hasn't had like the loudest camp, had the game that he had tonight. Okay, we're feeling good about Tank Dell again. Stephon Diggs has been a star all camp. Nico Collins had such a great year last year when he was all by himself, and it was just C.J. Stroud and him at the very end of the year. You saw that game against the Colts where Nico Collins was the entire Texans offense, and then, of course, in the first playoff game, I think he had like 70 receiving yards basically in like the first 5 minutes. They've got a great unit. I do hate the saying, we're top 2 and not 2. Like, just say you're number 1 if you feel that way. There's going to be some other NFL fan bases, though, that have some strong arguments that they have a better wide receiver group with the 1 and the number 2 guy. Like the Rams, for example, they've got Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Nacua's coming off of Rookie of the Year season. Kupp, I mean, was practically MVP at wide receiver a couple of years ago. He had a strong case to win it as a wide receiver. That I don't think it's happened ever. There's a lot of other really good wide receiver groups. The difference is you got CJ Stroud with this wide receiver group, and that should elevate everything even further. But he also, by that same logic, might be elevating it as it is. Like maybe Nico Collins is as paid as he is now because of CJ Stroud. Maybe the same thing with Tank Dell. We'll see if, God forbid, Stroud gets hurt. If Davis Mills can come in with this group of weapons and be better. To Mills' credit, he's had a pretty good camp. Seems to be actually developing. Had a nice little throw over the middle for a first down to Robert Woods where it looked like he was going to step over the line of scrimmage. It was a good game for Mills. Good for him. He has always been frustratingly robotic and statuesque and seems to be adding a little bit of an extra element to his game. Now, it's going up against backups, of course, and as these preseason games drag on, the backups, when they come into the game gets pretty ugly pretty quickly. More things to react to. People were making a big deal about this, and again, I want to shout out at Texans Commenter for putting all these clips out there. It makes my job a lot easier as a radio person, finding all of these clips. But Josh Allen was asked if he misses Stephon Diggs at a press conference this week. Here's what he had to say.
At any point during camp, have you missed Stephon?
I mean, I think Steph's a great player, and what he brought to this team was special. So miss is I don't know if I'd say miss. You know, he was a guy that was reliable. You can look to. He's going to have the juice each and every day. I'm sure he's bringing it over there in Houston. So definitely, yeah, you can't say that you don't miss that. But I am very happy with what we got going on here and how hard the guys have been working. And yeah.
So people heard that. The written version of that tweet got turned into graphics by some of those NFL aggregator accounts. And I felt like they were rather disingenuous with the way that they portrayed it. Because, oh, well, he doesn't sound like he misses Stephon Diggs. Well, what the fuck is Josh Allen supposed to do when he gets asked that question? Are you supposed to say, yeah, I can't believe he's not here anymore. These guys are just not the same. He's not going to say that. But he's also not going to, like, slurp Stephon either, or say that Stephon Diggs sucks. Like he's got to walk the line here, as quarterbacks do, and be political. I mean, everyone will think you're full of shit if you say you're not going to miss Stephon Diggs unless there's something that was going on behind the scenes, and you don't want to air that dirty laundry, even if Stephon Diggs was yelling at you a lot. But at the same time, yeah, you got current wide receivers, and you don't want these guys to think that you've got a wandering eye. And you read a quote like that where it says, so misses, I don't know if I'd say miss. That gets turned into something that's entirely different than when you watch the quote, watch his eyes, watch his body language, and listen to him. It sounds totally different. And it's one of the more frustrating things that I'm noticing these days in all coverage of anything by the media. Quotes that get turned into graphics that blow up. And it's all about clicks, but people don't want to actually watch the quote, listen to the quote, and judge for themselves. Usually things that are said when heard or watched, the tone is significantly less subjective. You see a quote that maybe suggests that Josh Allen doesn't miss Stephon Diggs, and you're somebody who doesn't like Stephon Diggs, you're probably going to be predispositioned when you see a quote that says, like, yeah, I wouldn't say I miss him. You're going to be like, yeah, Josh Allen's sick of that guy, you know? So I feel like the way that the media portrays some of this stuff, it's not great, but the game is the game. Got to make money, got to get clicks. Another interview, I guess this isn't an interview, another quote of note, another take of note this week as we get closer and closer to the start of hot take season, prediction season. Joe Fortenbaugh was on First Take. Looks like it's a substitute crew. I do not recognize the faces in this round table, but Fortenbaugh and his mustache had a very ballsy take about who he thinks is going to be one of the teams to miss the playoffs this coming year.
For them. Joe, is there someone on that list you think might miss the postseason this year?
I think there's more than one. We're going to limit it to one. I'm going to take the Houston Texans. I'm going to say they missed the playoffs this year. Ooh. You start with the fact that everybody loves the Houston Texans. Yeah, that's how they built Caesar's Palace out in Las Vegas, because everybody with the exact same opinion often works. But that's just the joke part of it, right? They're a 10-win team from last year. You peel back a lot of what they did, there's reason to believe some regression could be coming. Everyone is very fixated on C.J. Stroud. Is fantastic. D'Amico Ryan's fantastic. Sky, 5 years, it's stock you want to own. Next year, I think there's a step back. Number one, 7-3 in one-score games last year. That's an outlier performance. That regresses to the mean. It means you end up losing more games next year. Number two, top 5 in turnover differential. There's no stat that predicts wins and losses more than turnovers. The turnover differential falls back, and they were on the outlier side of the spectrum. If that falls back, you have losses there as well. Another thing no one really talks about when we just gush over this team, which, again, they deserve a lot of it, they had a very easy schedule last year. They have a top 7 schedule in terms of difficulty this year. Targets on their back. People are coming for them. So you go ahead and you take a tougher schedule. You take a couple indicators that probably aren't going to break their way. One-score games comes back to earth. Turnover differential comes back to earth. They did add Steph Diggs. There's a lot to like about them. Again, 3 and 5 years out. I think that's the team that, keep in mind, in that division, Jacksonville's a buy low for me, and I think Indianapolis is going to be right in the hunt too. And if you miss winning through the division, you got to grab a wild card spot. And competing for 1 of 3 wild card spots in the AFC, it's a tall order.
Well, let me listen.
I know you agree.
You guys,
so thank you.
No, you guys are much bigger.
I know some people are going to hear that and get mad, but what did he say there that was wrong? We talked about it on the radio show this week. I think we did this on Thursday's show. I mean, they played a lot of close games, and as Brandon Hallam says, the Texans were 10 points from being 13-4 instead of 10-7. That's fair. But they did go up against a very easy schedule this past year. I mean, how many great quarterbacks did they play? Lamar Jackson twice. Joe Burrow. Who else? Great quarterbacks. Are you going to put Trevor Lawrence there? Probably not. He brought up the turnover differential. I think there's a chance the turnover differential is the same this year, just given all the things that I said about the pass rush a little bit earlier, the waves of pass rushers that they have. Now, Kamari Lassiter is going to have to be really good. I wish he got to play tonight. The safety play is going to have to be better. I hope that Kalen Bullock actually factors into this team towards the end of the year. The range that he has is huge, and the Texans really struggled to cover deep downfield last year. I feel like he's the kind of guy that, if he lives up to the potential that clearly Nick Caserio, the Texans, see in him, that he actually could be like a really impactful piece there. The other thing that he said was the point differential. It was the schedule. It was the turnovers. I think it was those 3 things. And if you add those 3 things up, if you're a Vegas person, those are the things that you're going to look at and say, hey, I'm going to bet against this team, or I'm going to short this team, or whatever. And everyone is kissing this team's ass to the point where Jason Braddock writes a column saying, like, hey, maybe the Texans should shut up a little bit. And everyone lost their fucking minds. Everyone got so angry and mad and yelled about it. I thought it was rather unbecoming. Listen, some people are going to say what they feel like about this team. They were 10-7 last year. It's not like they blew the doors off of the entire league. They surprised a lot of people, sure, but when they played the Ravens twice, they got their asses kicked. You know, lots to be excited about, lots to be happy about, but there's also a lot of, I feel like, things for them to prove that C.J. Stroud can win a shootout against a great quarterback, that this defense can slow down a great quarterback, that D'Amico Ryans can out-scheme great offensive minds. I felt like he struggled against Shane Steichen this year. If he's the one that's running the show on the defense, maybe it's Matt Burke, the defensive coordinator, whatever the case. These are things that I think are totally merited as far as maybe looking at the Texans and not being 100% all in. One last thing I wanted to hit before I hit the road and go to bed. Appreciate y'all staying up so late here on a Saturday. Hope you all had some drinks, some fun tonight. Quandre Diggs is a safety that I covered in Seattle with the Seahawks. I played him in a game of NBA 2K once. I really like him. He played at UT. Undersized, but he's just not very tall. I think he's 5'9", but sturdy guy, hits hard. Once saw him rock the shit out of a tight end. I think it was Irv Smith in a Seahawks-Vikings game. Incredible range for a guy who's that size, very fast. And the Titans signed him to a 1-year, $5 million deal. And I can't help but be frustrated that that's all it took. Because that was one of my big concerns with the Texans was, hey, are they going to get a safety that's better than the guys that they have? Because Petrie is now, Jalen Petrie, playing nickel. If he plays nickel, then you have to put somebody else in there at safety. And that means Eric Murray or, damn, the other guy's name is eluding me. But, I mean, that's sort of the point. The MJ Stewart, like the safety position is an important one. I'm biased. I played it in high school, but you want to have a guy who's a difference maker. And $5 million, Quandre Diggs is still, I think, a really good player. And ask anybody who covered him in Seattle last year. I was talking to some of the people that I'm still friends with who work in Seattle media, and they all said he played well last year. And this is what Diggs said. His age impacted the level of interest in his service. He says he feels no drop as he heads into his 11th year. There's no stage of my career, said Diggs via the Titans website. I'm 31. People act like you get to 30 and you can't play dead. I play well. I do all the things that you need me to do. I go get the football. I have been very consistent in that. Top 10, top 5 in the last how many years. I go get the football. I want to be physical and I want to tackle. I want to do those things. And I will attest he does all those things. But I also want to help the guys learn the game. I'm very cerebral with what I do. I take it seriously. It's my job. And when I'm dialed in and when I'm ready to go, it's go time. I want Diggs. And yes, Brandon, I know he's signed with the Titans. That's a good signing. Jamal Adams, not a very good signing unless the Titans can actually convince him to play linebacker. He should play linebacker. He's best at linebacker. Undersized linebacker, but linebacker. Called him Blitz Boy. He really didn't like that up in Seattle. Diggs is a good player. $5 million is all it took. 1 year. You don't have a lot of depth at safety. I mean, Jimmy Ward barely played last year. It felt like, I think he still played 12 games, but it felt like he missed a lot more. And I don't think he had the kind of impact that you were expecting. It almost felt like he was brought in more than anything, if you just take a look back at last year, as somebody who could help translate the defense that D'Amico Ryans wanted to run for all of these Houston Texans players. So I think this might be a missed opportunity, not going after Quandre Diggs, especially if he signed for just that much. Anyway, that is going to wrap up today's edition of the Gallant Says podcast. Sorry about the delays at first. And sorry, of course, as always, about being like 3 hours past game time when I put this thing out there. I appreciate everybody, though, who sticks with me. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this on YouTube, like the video, or on Twitch, same thing. Or follow me on Twitter, @GallantSays. Every little bit of support helps. I enjoy doing this on the side. I like being able to still do this by myself. Nothing, not meant to be a shot at Joe or anything like that. I just feel at my best when I'm by myself, especially when I'm uncensored by myself, and especially when I'm talking football. And for whatever reason, people don't really seem to like listening to us talk about football on ESPN 97.5. I don't know. I don't know why that is. But until the next time we do this, I think for the short term, we're going to stick to doing this twice a week, Monday and Thursday. So my obsessive compulsive prep allows me to actually do it. We might get to 5 days a week, but I got to take things a step at a time, baby step at a time. We'll talk football. We'll talk NFL, Texans, occasionally Astros, maybe politics from time to time. It'll be all over the place. And I think that's what you guys like about me, I think. Anyway, until next time, so long, farewell. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of your weekend.